My name's Drew Mitchell. I've been working with the Barnett Sailing Co-op, the Lower Mainland Sailing Co-op. I've worked with the Viking Co-op, and I've been with North Sails for the last 10 years. I've been, helping you guys maintain your sails, replace your sails, and actually, I've been lucky enough to go out sailing with a few of you. Tonight, I'm going to go through some sail care and also some sail trim. We're going to start with sail care. And as a co-op, you guys, your sails are used probably more than your average sailor. So, thinking about and knowing and having knowledge about sail care, I think is pretty important for each and every member, because you can help extend the life of the sails that you're using. Sails are dynamic and they're constantly moving, so they do end up breaking down. So I'm just going to go over a few things that I think you guys should think about or consider while using your sails and using the boats. So I'm going to start. So I'm going to go through here quickly. There's so far I came up with UV damage and flogging. I find those are the two biggest things that break down sails. Eventually, if you flog a sail long enough, it's going to break down. And if you leave it in the sun long enough, it's going to break down. I also thought about chafe, proper storage, leech line and foot line, and then just a little note about like repairing sails. So we'll start with UV damage. I think the main thing is when you're out sailing, there's not much you can do. Most people like to go sailing on nice days when the sun is out. So enjoy that, have your mainsail all the way out. But the big thing is when you get back to the dock. And even I know we live, I think the majority of us here live in the Pacific Northwest and sail here. It is not like the Caribbean in terms of UV rays. But at the same time, if you do leave a sail exposed, the UV rays will damage that sail. So one big thing that you want to make sure, and I know that all the boats do have them, is sail covers. So you want to make sure that sail cover is on properly. And what basically that entails is that you don't want to see any of the sail showing. And a lot of the time, where you would see the sail showing is underneath the boom, kind of where the flakes kind of fold down and you button up the sail cover. Sometimes a little bit of like the leech or the foot will kind of pop out underneath the sail cover. You always want to make sure you stuff that back in. With the co-op, you're not sure when it'll be used next. I know the boats are quite busy, but making sure that sail's away properly, I think is pretty important. Head sail, you want to make sure the UV cover is rolled the proper way. The biggest mistake that we have, that we find here, North Sails Vancouver, is the sailors that take their sails off for the winter, put them back on and end up rolling the roller further the wrong way. So the sail is actually exposed to the elements instead of the UV cover. So on the right-hand side, you can kind of see here in the picture, this white sail, but you can see a little bit of a brighter white along the foot and the leech. And that's what I'm talking about, the UV cover for a head sail. And what that's on there for is when you furl the head sail up, it slowly starts filling up and the clew starts raising. And basically once it's all furled up, the only part of the sail that's going to be exposed to the elements in the UV is going to be that UV cover. It is a little tricky on sails like the one on my right, and that's why I use this picture, because both a white sail and a white cover can look like each other. So it's something you want to kind of take notification of and make sure that when you do roll it up, that the cover is on the right side. If the sail is already on the boat, it's not a bad idea to go and check, but probably the person who installed the sail is the one that really should be careful on when they install it and which way they furl the drum. The other thing is if the UV cover is starting to fall off the sail, you're going to want to replace it. Same thing as if you don't have that UV cover and you furl the sail up, what happens is the leech and the foot where the UV cover should be will end up getting UV damage and it will break down quicker than the rest of the sail. So if your UV cover, if you're noticing it as a co-op member and your UV cover is falling off the sail, or you can see some stitching starting to come off, so it might be getting a little loose, you're probably going to want to replace that UV cover or at least get it stitched back on. So that's something you may want to talk to the sail coordinator of the co-op with. I know like Jeff and Vitali would probably be the guys you'd want to mention that to. But it's a whole team effort. So these are little things that, you could notice that may help prevent further damage on the sails. Another thing that I find is sometimes when you furl a head sail, it doesn't furl perfectly. What you want to do is you almost want a little bit of a tension on the sheet, but not too much as you're furling it up. Because if you just release the sheet, the sail is kind of flogging and you pull it, sometimes the sail will fold over on itself as you're furling it. Or sometimes you actually will get a really loose furl and there'll be parts of the sail showing. So you want to make sure you put enough tension on it. When you furl it up, all you can see is the UV cover instead of the sail. Sometimes it takes once or twice to get to the dock, but it's good to make sure that you do furl it up. The UV cover is on the right side, and when it is furled, there's no sail showing, and it's all UV cover. Moving on to the next side, flogging. So flogging is a terminology is when your sail is flapping the wind and is not full of air on either port or starboard side. Flogging, happens, like a good example is this when you go through a tack. So when you go through a tack, you put your bow through the wind, you hear like the sail will kind of shudder a little bit until it fills on the next side. That is completely fine. No one's ever going to have tacks where you never have a flog. But what you want to do is not flog your sail when it's not needed to, or it's not kind of part of the sailing process. And the three ways that I kind of find to prevent too much flogging is making sure you trim your sails properly. So an untrimmed sail could flog or flutter. And like say if your mainsail is too far out and you're trying to head upwind, the sail's gonna have wind on both sides. But as you start pulling that sail in, the wind will start going down the backside and the front side almost evenly. So a properly trimmed sail will not flog. So if one of your sails is flogging, maybe try to pull in a sheet. Most of the time it is pull it in. The odd times it's let it out if you are pinching. Either reefing or roller reefing your head sail when it's too windy. So I find when the wind starts picking up and there's too much sail area up there and you just can't pull in that main sheet hard enough, the sail will start to flog. And what you can do to depower the sails is decrease the sail area. And to decrease the sail area in the mainsail, you'd put in a reef. And in the roller reefing head sail, you'd probably put a turn or two on. And then the sails will have less power in them. They'll be easier to pull in and they won't flog as much. Another thing is, I know when traveling around the Pacific Northwest and cruising, especially in the summer months, you don't always get the wind you want. Sometimes you're heading upwind to the anchorage and heading upwind home. So a lot of the times, especially if you have a bit of a timeline, whether it be the sun going down or getting home for a Sunday night meal, turning that engine on and kind of power sailing is definitely an option, and definitely a pretty good option. One thing you don't want to do is power the boat. So when you turn your engine on and you start power sailing, your apparent wind moves forward. So your sails need to be a little bit tighter in. If the wind is directly in front of you and you still have your sails up and you're powering, it would be that you're never going to be able to get your sails in tight enough to keep them from flogging. So if your destination is directly upwind and you've decided that you won't need to motor to get there in time, or you've decided to motor, put the sails away so they don't flog. And if you ever are motor sailing and you just can't really stop the flogging from happening, first of all, it's kind of annoying, but at the end of the day, you'd probably want to take your sails down or turn your engine off and start sailing again. Flogging a sail for 2 to 3 to 4 hours, could actually rip the leech edge off the back of the sail. And it just breaks the fibers down and stretches them. Next one, chafe is something that happens on any sort of sail that's going to be touching anything on the boat. The main kind of chafe spots on a boat are kind of spreaders, stanchions, shrouds, chain plate bases, things like that, kind of where the sail will routinely hit and rub against. So like a definition of chafe is when the sail rubs against something on the boat enough times that it starts to break down the sail material. if you notice any chafe on a sail, you should put a protective patch on that sail. And example, as you can see here, if you can see my mouse, there's a little kind of spreader patch up there. So we actually reinforce the locations of the sail where we know it's going to be touching something up very regularly. Saying that, sometimes, every boat's built a little different, and depending on how you trim your sails, some sails will start getting wear and tear on different locations than that are normal. And instead of just ignoring it, if you see like a little chafe mark or you see a little wear in the sail material, you want to notify the sail coordinator, and you'd want to get a patch down, and we're going to talk about that in a little bit. And pretty much the protective patch now protects the sail from the chafe. And you can always replace the protective patch once it wears out instead of having to replace the sail or repairing the sail. The next one is proper storage. So with the co-op boats, I know it's a pretty big sail over there on the right-hand side. Your sails aren't quite that large, but storing them properly is really important. And the reason for that is just longevity. So with the co-op, most of the sails do stay up, I'm pretty sure, most of the year. The co-op's pretty active. But I know a lot of the co-op is a bit of a stepping ground to some people looking to purchase their own boats. And when you do get your own boat, if you aren't if you aren't sailing in the winter, or you aren't sailing for an extended period of time, it's not a bad idea to get your sails down and out of the Pacific Northwest kind of damp coldness. It just tends to decrease the life of the sail. And my first point would be take furled head sails down. A big windstorm is predicted. I would say that'd be a job list I'd put on for the co-op. If you do, Vancouver gets 2-3 windstorms a year, and you're usually pretty well notified about that they're coming. Those furled head sails will tend to unfurl themselves in really inconvenient kind of ways, and they tend to come out and flap themselves to death in the windstorm. And sometimes you can actually damage your forestay and your furling unit. So getting that head sail down does not only prevent the sail from possibly being damaged, but also damaging the forestay, which keeps the mast up, so it's fairly important. So I said before, you don't want to leave the sails on the boats over the winter, not in use. But at the same time, if you're going to be using your boats, don't be taking them off every time. It's just if they're left, wet under a sail cover for 3 to 5 months, you're going to start seeing some growth in there and some breaking down. You're not storing in a damp weather location. So say if you came back from say if you do, you don't like sailing in the winter, you came back from a Thanksgiving cruise, it was pouring rain, like 12 degrees, and you want to take your sails off your boat and your storage location is in your boat. Don't take your sails down soaking wet and then put them down underneath the boat. That's probably not the best situation. You probably want to wait till a couple days until you get a clear weather window, get back down to the boat, take the sails off when they're dry, fold them up when they're dry, get them into a bag, and then store them in a location that's not wet. Some boats do have really good humidifiers and other ways to keep the moisture out. So in Vancouver, some people live in some pretty tight spaces, so you don't have to keep your sails at home or in the garage if you don't have a garage. But just make sure you're not putting them in a boat that's going to be damp all winter, because you will see the effects. And then also store them properly, flaked or rolled. Flaking sails usually makes them easier to carry and actually quite a bit smaller. But actually only putting horizontal flakes in them for a short period of time doesn't really damage them. If you're just to stuff them into a bag, like an old tired shirt, it is going to affect the sail shape. It's probably going to crimp some of the fibers. So flaking them or rolling them before you put them away is my recommendation. And if there is a sail bag, get them in the sail bag. That protects them from anything. If something spills on them or if something is hot around them, it could protect them. And also it's very easy for identification if you do have more than one sail on the boat when you do plan to go put them back on. Leach lines and foot lines. Every sail that we build here at North Sails, and I would say 90% of the sails in the world, should have a leach line and a foot line. And basically, a leach line and a foot line is a line that's attached from the head of the sail. The leach line would be from the head of the sail down to the clew, and usually that line comes out of the leach tape of the sail and it has a little cleat. And you can tension that line and loosen that line. And same idea for the foot. It goes from the clew to the tack of the sail, and there'll be a little clam cleat up there that the rope will come out of the line and has a little cleat that you can put in. Basically, when the sail starts getting a lot of load and the back edge can't support itself anymore, and it starts happening more and more as sails age, you need to add a little leach line to stop the sail from fluttering. A lot of the times you'll hear almost like it sounds like a helicopter just went overhead. And usually if you look at, the back edge and the bottom edge of your two sails, you'll quickly identify which one is starting to flutter. And basically you just want to use that that line, and you want to pull it just snug enough to stop the fluttering. You don't need to pull it much harder, because it will start putting a bit of a hook in your sail, but you do want to pull it and just till it stops, and then put it in the cleat. One thing that I'm bad at this and forgetting, and it's very hard, especially after a long day on the water. Last thing you probably remember is easing the foot line and leach line, especially if it's a windy day. But if you can remember to ease the foot and leach line when you get back to the dock, it's much better for the sails, as it doesn't kind of stretch the sails. Without the load on the sails anymore, you don't need that tension in the leach or foot line. So releasing those and easing them, or just pulling them out of the cleat, so that when you pull them straight and fold them away or roll them, that they're kind of eased. A lot of the time you'll notice, if it's been a windy day previous to the time that you use the boat, that you're using the boat, as if the leach and foot lines are cranked on. If you do see that, or you see a hook in your sail, I'd probably just ease the leach lines and see if that makes an adjustment, or your foot line. But leach and foot lines are pretty important, and you never want to leave that leach flapping, especially if you're going upwind, because what happens is the leach line, it's in a leach cover, and the leach tape. And the leach tape will create a hinge and start fluttering on itself, and that hinge on the sail will actually break the sail down, and eventually it'll start cracking along the edge of the leach tape, and then eventually your leach starts fluttering off the sail. So that's just, the leach and foot line really help prevent that. Repairing sails on the water. So I know with the co-op, usually if you have a damaged sail, you might not want to use it. You put it away, furl it up, put the mainsail down, and then bring it back and talk to the sailing coordinator. But saying that, I believe, most boats should have a small repair kit. And like, these repair kits, are super simple. And even if, you don't have to be a sailmaker to really use them. Basically, what's in a repair kit is sticky back sail repair material. So it's basically a sticker. So it's Dacron with a sticky on the other side. You pull the sticker off, you stick it down on the rip or the hole of the sail, or wherever it might be chafing, and you put that down, and you put it on port and starboard side. And that usually fixes it, or makes it, good enough to get yourself back to the dock. Like, putting the sails away is great, but say if you rip your mainsail, and your two rips your mainsail and your headsail, and you put the engine on, and whatever the engine ends up failing, you're going to need to use those sails again. So being able to get some patch material on those sails to make sure they are usable. If your engine dies and you're in a bad current, you're going the wrong way, get your sails back up, start sailing again. And then the other one would be wax thread, needles, and palms. So, if it is a bit of a more major rip, or if the sticky back material, say if it's a really wet day and the sticky back material is not working, or it keeps falling off, so like stitching wax needles in a palm, you just put the wax thread through the end of the needle, tie a knot, and you just basically, start doing a zigzag stitch and putting the sail back together. I would recommend having a repair, I don't know, usually kit on every boat, and it would just be those 4 things. You could make it a little more elaborate if you'd want, but I think those basic things would be able to get you back to the dock and repair any sort of minor issue you're going to have on a sail, without making it a further issue. So that was it for sail care. did we have any questions on sail care at the moment, or anything I might not have covered that someone might want to bring up? Okay, I don't think I saw any questions come up, so we'll continue moving on. There'll be another question period at the end. So sail trim, I'm gonna do a quick overview. And so we're gonna do upwind and downwind with the mainsail. We're gonna talk about the draft, the traveler, the main sheet, sail controls and twist. Genoa, we're gonna go over telltales, ticklers, Genoa car, how to position your Genoa car, and how your tension and draft. Okay. So what I just wanted to go over, everyone probably, I don't know if you've been on a sailboat, you may have heard the term draft. And in layman terms, the position of the draft refers to the location, the deepest part of your sail. So we actually measured as a percentage of the distance along the cord line. So the cord length is basically the length of your sail. So say the cord length in a mainsail at the foot length would be the foot. So that would be your cord length. So, and then the draft, you would say 30%. So at this little diagram over here on the right, it looks like that draft, I would say, is at 35%-ish. Kind of looks like more of a head sail than a mainsail. So I'm going to start with the mainsail, and we're just going to talk about light air upwind. And I think, you know, especially in the Pacific Northwest, you know, we are known for our lighter airs here. So knowing how to get your boat moving and powering the boat up, I find is pretty important. So draft, roughly you want it about 45 to 50% aft of the mast. You want your top telltale flying 50% of the time. So telltales are those red, you can see one right here. The red little basically nylon pieces of material that flutter off the back of your sail and let you know how the flow is coming off the back edge of your sail. So I wanted to skip the sail controls and just drop down to the traveler, but the top telltale flying at least 50%. So to do that, what I usually do with light air is I'll take the traveler and I'll move it to windward. So you're going to move that traveler up to windward, and we're talking about upwind, so we're sailing a close hauled course. And then I start pulling my main sheet in, and I pull my main sheet in until it gets roughly to where the backstay is. So, you know, center line of the boat. And that should give you enough twist, and most of the time, for that top telltale to be flying 50 to 100% of the time. Then if you were to drop your traveler down, as soon as you start dropping your traveler down, your boom will go down lower than the backstay. So every time you drop your traveler down, you're going to want to pull the main sheet in to pull that boom roughly back up to center line. And as you start doing that, you're taking twist out of the sail. So you're starting to pull the boom down a little more than more from the edge of the cockpit. And that will start closing the top of the sail, and that will start stalling that top telltale. So if your telltale isn't flying or isn't flying more than 50% of the time, you're going to want to add twist. So you're going to want traveler up and main sheet out. So a lot of the time in light air, I always start with the traveler all the way up, pull the main sheet in, start going upwind. And then if my telltale is flying 100% of the time, I know I can add a little bit more power to the sail. So what I do is I drop the traveler down a little bit and I pull in that main sheet so that the boom's back at center line and start closing the top of the mainsail, but making sure that that top tail is flying at least 50 to 100% of the time. When you're out cruising, I would probably aim for 100% all the time. But if you want to focus on sail trim, you know, a good mainsail trimmer on a race boat going upwind is looking for the top telltale flying at least 50% of the time. But at that point, there's very small margin for error. So if the wind changes at all, the wind strength, the wind direction, or if the angle of the boat changes, that's going to affect that top telltale. So if you give yourself a little more twist, you're going to have more forgiveness. So I would say as a cruiser, you're going to want to be having 75 to 100% of the time that top telltale showing. And you do that by adding twists. And you can see down here, I'd say pull the windward, each sheet, so boom is at midship, and open up top of sail to help induce the sail flow. So all boats have a few sail controls on the mainsail. But some boats have Cunninghams. I think the majority of the co-op boats, or if not all the co-op boats, do not. And basically the Cunningham is just a way to pull the luff tight, so you can use your halyard identical to a Cunningham. If you had a Cunningham, you wouldn't want it on. With a halyard, you'd want it snug, I would say. You don't want to see any sort of vertical lines going from the tack to the head in light air. The tighter your halyard is, the flatter the sail is going to get, and you're going to want your draft at roughly 45 to 50%. So you're not going to want that halyard too tight. All the co-op boats have boom vangs, and basically the boom vang, you can see it right here. It's basically attached to the boom and then down to the mast, and it pulls down on the boom, and it actually also helps bend the lower section or put tension on the lower section here as well, which helps depower the sail. So you're not going to need the boom vang in light air. All the boom tension, the boom up and down, is going to be done by your main sheet. And then the outhaul is usually back here. Okay, and it's basically usually a shackle that attaches to the clew of the sail that runs in the back of the boom or off the thing, and then you can make an adjustment. You can ease your outhaul and the sail will get fuller, and you can tighten your outhaul and make it flatter. In lighter air, you don't want too full of a sail because you're still trying to get the light air to go around your sail, and if your sail starts looking a bit like a balloon, you're going to lose the air off the back edge of the sail. So having a relatively flat or tight outhaul is good for light air. And you know, I talked about sail controls. So backstay is another one that kind of affects the sail controls. All the boats, all the co-op boats do not have an adjustable backstay, but if you did, or if you do have a boat and you're on here, you've sailed it on another boat, you would want your backstay off. There's no reason to start putting tension on your backstay in light air. So moving into medium air, and we're still talking about the mainsail, I kind of put 8 to 15 knots. I would say 8 would be the low side of medium air, 15 knots would be the high end of medium air. Now you're going to want to start moving your draft roughly to 45%, and how you do that is halyard tension. So you're going to want to add a little bit more halyard tension in medium air than you would in light air. And the reason for that is the sail is getting, especially Dacron sails, are going to get fuller, and adding that halyard is going to flatten them out and help you move that draft forward. Sail controls. So now as I said, you're going to want to add some halyard. It's okay in medium air, the lower end, to have some small wrinkles on the front edge of your sail, like horizontal wrinkles, not vertical ones, horizontal. But I would say around 10 to 12 knots, you're probably going to want to make that sail pretty flat. Boom vang, you can actually now start snugging your boom vang. So if you are easing your sheet at all, the boom doesn't pop up. Outhaul in the lighter stuff, in that 8 to 12 knots, you're probably going to want to ease your outhaul a little bit and get a nice little shape in the foot of the sail. This helps power the boat up, especially if you're in bigger seas. We do sail in relatively flat waters, but you know, if you do get a good westerly, there's a nice fetch from Vancouver Island, you're trying to get out of English Bay, you can get some pretty decent waves. And having that little bit of shape in the bottom of the foot powers up the sail and gets you moving through those waves a little more efficiently. At the upper end, I'd say at 50 knots, you're probably going to start depowering again. So you might want to ease or add some tension to that outhaul. Backstay in medium air, depending on what type of boat you have, masthead. Masthead boats really get affected by the backstay much more than a fractional rig, because when you start pulling back the head, the tip of the mast, it really affects the forestay sag, so it starts straightening the forestay. But we don't need to go too much into detail about that. But you know, you'd probably start snugging up your backstay in medium air. Then traveler. So now the boat in that 8 to 12 knots, I would say 8 to 15, you're going to start powering up the boat. So previously in the light air, our traveler was up and our main sheet was eased a little bit, so the boom was at center line. You're going to want to start dropping that traveler down probably closer to the center line of the boat and pulling that main sheet in so that the boom is also on center line, and that will really start powering up the boat. You're closing the leech, you're taking the twist out, but one thing you always want to do is make sure that that top telltale is still flying. If that top telltale is completely stalled and it's hiding around the back of the sail, you're going to want to add some twist to the mainsail, and how you do that is traveler up, main sheet down. And small adjustments will make big differences. It's a very high aspect sail. Heavy air. So heavy air is 15, I would say 15 plus knots. So you're going to want to add a little bit more halyard or Cunningham to the mainsail to try to pull the draft forward. Okay, so in heavy air, you might start seeing those horizontal wrinkles just because of load, and you're going to just want to add some halyard tension. Boom vang, you're going to want to put that boom vang on. You can actually snug it on quite a bit, even more than your main sheet. That will just help depower the lower part of your sail, as well as it gives you the ability to vang sheet, and I'll explain what that is in a little bit. Out haul, I say cranked. You want your out haul all the way on. You want to flatten that sail out. Very rarely do you want any sort of shape in the lower end of your sail and big winds. You know, maybe the odd time. If you are in big sea state, but a lot of time you get that power out of your head sail. Backstay, you're going to want to start really putting that backstay on to bend your mast and to flatten your forestay. And that ends up helping flatten your mainsail. So the traveler, now we're going to actually start seeing this boom drop down past kind of the backstay midship location, heavy air. So the mainsail is kind of like now like a trim tab almost. So you can drop the traveler down, and that will basically help spill the air. So I always say ease traveler to leeward as the boat angle increases past optimal. And boat angle, optimal boat angle, it's not, depending on who you are, it's not how quickly the boat sails, but it might be who's on the boat. Say if you have some family members on the boat or another co-op, and you're driving and doing main sheet, and you guys aren't comfortable on the boat, then you're going to want to ease that traveler to leeward to spill some of that air. If you're out there with a bunch of guys in the co-op and you guys, might be racing another boat, and you're okay with a little bit of heel, that optimal angle heel, you might be able to keep that traveler up a little bit. So vang sheeting with the traveler. So the traveler has a limited amount of room that it can eventually go down, and eventually it's at the end of the track, and the traveler can't go anymore. And if you still feel like you're overpowered, you can do something called vang sheeting. So what you do is you actually pull the boom vang on really tight. And then you can actually just ease the main sheet, and the main sheet now, the vang will not allow the boom to go up. So when you ease the main sheet, the boom will just go out. So it's almost like a continuation of your traveler. If anyone's ever sailed a laser, that's what the lasers do, because they don't have a traveler. Their traveler sits at the leeward end of the stern of the boat. And as soon as you get too overpowered, you just pull your boom vang on, and you just start easing your main sheet, and it just opens up and spills the air. And then when the boat flattens out, or you can hike it flat, or you pull it in. So vang sheeting, if your optimal angle of heel is not, if you're not happy about it, and you're all the way at the end of your traveler and you're wanting to go upwind, you can start vang sheeting, and it should help you put the boat up a little bit. Mainsail trim downwind. So one thing that I always find is, like, a lot of people like mainsail, especially mainsail trimmers, while racing, but even when cruising, to get the most optimal, you want to let the sail out to the proper angle of apparent wind. So it's not always all the way out. So going downwind, your sails aren't all the way out, and going up when your sails aren't always in. Sometimes they're out a little bit if you're kind of reaching, especially if you're going downwind and you're kind of on a bit of an angle. You don't want it all the way out. You can kind of see this boat, it's got its kite up, so it is definitely sailing downwind, and you can see its boom's relatively far in, and that mainsail is pretty far in, because the boat's moving quite quickly, so the parent wind has moved forward, so the main sheet's got to get pulled in. And what I do in terms of when I'm reaching and not sailing directly downwind with the mainsail all the way out, or the boat's moving pretty quickly, and I think the parent wind's moving further forward than the true wind, is it's when in doubt, let it out. So you just let the mainsail out, and then as soon as you see it start luffing, usually starts luffing in the middle of the mainsail first, then you pull it in a couple feet, and then if there's any sort of changes in the wind direction or the boat direction, you can make those adjustments, and it's, playing with it every once in a while and easing it out letting it luff, and then pulling it in to ensure that you might not be over trimmed. But it's pretty evident if you're under trimmed because you will see a bubble in the sail. One thing is when jibing, make sure all battens are flipped to the proper side. So when out jibing, especially in light air, sometimes the battens won't pop to the new side. So especially with a sail with full battens, I know one co-op just got a new mainsail with full battens. So they'll sit in on the port shape. They'll all have like a round in them to port. Then when you jibe, sometimes they won't pop all the way through. And what I do sometimes is I grab the boom, and if you pull down and to windward, it can help pop the top batten's usually one that's the trickiest. And if it's constantly happening and your battens are not flipping when sailing, the battens might be a little tight. So you might need to loose them up a little bit. But it is pretty regular in light air to have to manually pop full batten mainsails or sails with full battens in the top one or two. They just have a little bit more load than the leech battens. Going down, when you want to ease, all your controls, you could probably ease your halyard so you get a little more shape in the sail. You can ease your outhaul so you get a nice belly in the sail to start powering the sail up. And boom bang, you're not going to want that same bang tension on, especially if you're sailing heavy wind and you want to turn downwind. You're going to want to let your boom bang off before you go downwind because it kind of controls the leech. And you'll have too much tension in your mainsail. You're going to want to spill that before you start heading downwind. One thing is you want to hold, if you're heading directly downwind, something that you see a lot of people do is hold the boom out. Sometimes depending on the swell or how much wind there is, the boom will start falling into the cockpit. So you can kind of hold it out. You can hold it out with a hand. One thing you don't want to do is sit on the boom. I see that very regularly, but that's just like putting your boom bang back on. You're closing all the twist. Downwind, you're still looking for that top telltale. So you're going to want twist in your sail. So you're going to want your boom bang off so your boom's allowed to get up. And having someone sit on the boom, even though it's very comfortable, looks really cool for pictures, it's not very effective for sail trim. In heavy wind, if you do have a little, you can tension the boom too. So if you're in medium air and you're going downwind and you feel like that top telltale's kind of flying all the time, you want to add a bit of tension. You can add a little boom bang, but if you do that and the wind starts really picking up, you're going to want to have someone either responsible for easing the boom bang or even having the boom bang in the hand. So if you do end up on your ear wiping out, you can ease that boom bang and the boat will stand right back up. Or it should stand right back up. So I just wanted to talk about Genoa jib trim, so ticklers and telltales. So how to use a telltale window. So majority of the sails have these little telltale windows. All sails have ticklers on them. Ticklers are the ones, the wool ones on the sails. The telltales are the ones that we're looking on the mainsail. They're interchanged all the time, so don't worry if you call it tickler or telltale tickler. I'm sure they won't get offended. But knowing how to use them is definitely important. So this window is kind of nice, especially on sails. Like some of the Dacron white sails, you can't see through them in different lighting. Sometimes you can. On these black sails, you definitely can't. So getting these little windows is very helpful, so you can see how to trim the sail, because it allows these windows let you know how the flow is going along the front edge and the back edge of the sail. So if the windward tickler, so say the starboard tickler on this boat is stalling, that's basically telling you that the sail is you either need to bear off, so you're pointing too high, or you need to pull in your sail. So if you're on a close hauled and that front telltale starts stalling, that means you're kind of pinching, so you want to bear off. But if you're reaching along and like on a beam reach and that front telltale starts changing and your driver hasn't changed his tiller, that means the wind has moved forward or there was a wind change. So you're going to want to pull in the sail if you want to keep the same route or the same direction. Okay, so if the windward tickler, if you're sailing like close hauled, you don't want to bear off. Or if you want to stay on a straight path and you're not on a close haul, you can pull in the sail. The leeward tickler, so this one in this image is the port one. The leeward tickler tail is telling you either need to ease your sheet or bear off. Sorry, that should be easier sheet. Yeah, or bear off. So you, with the leeward tickler is stalling, that means, sorry, that means you should, yeah, ease, sorry, I got confused there. You need to, if the leeward one is stalling, you need to ease your sheet, okay? So that will make the sail, so that the flow on the back of the sail gets continued, okay? And the goal is to have both your tickler area and your telltale streaming aft. Also, if your leeward tickler is like flying around, you can bear off, and that should also help get that leeward tickler flying. Okay. You can either bear off or pull or ease your sheet. So Genoa jib trim upwind. So one thing is lead position. So I bet you a lot of the time, like co-op boats, or majority of people, I don't see many people changing leads very often, but it's a pretty key aspect to trimming your head sail. And I'm just going to give you guys a couple tips on how to figure out where the lead needs to be. So if you kind of see in this picture here, you can see this is the car, that's the sheet, and the tension's kind of equally along the leech and the foot of the sail. I would say that is like medium condition, so that's optimal. Then the forward one here where the lead has been moved forward, so the sheeting angle has been moved up and more tensions along the leech than the foot, that would be like a lighter wind setting. And then, and this is obviously exaggerated, and then if the car is further aft and the sheet now is pulling along the foot, that would be a more heavier air setting, because you'd want a flat foot and the twist on the leech, where here you'd want a tight leech and light wind to power up, a little bit of a baggy foot. Medium air, you probably want equal on both. So how do you find if your lead's in the right spot? This is something I do every time I put a new head sail on a boat as I go out, or anytime I'm going out on a boat, is I'll go upwind, I'll start sailing close hauled, and I'll get the driver, if I'm the driver, I'll put the sail up into the wind, and I want to see where those telltales break. So there's usually 3 sets of telltales, but you're just looking to see if where the sail breaks first. If the sail breaks first in the middle of the sail, you're happy, your car's in the right position. If the sail breaks down the bottom of the luff of the sail, so the bottom ticklers start popping up first, you're going to want to move that car back. And if the sail breaks up top first, you're going to want to move that car forward. And I always think of that as bottom back, so that you kind of figure the rest out. So bottom back, middle, you're happy, up top, forward. And you usually just want to do one. Usually these cars will have holes, so you want to make an adjustment by usually one hole and then try it again. Okay. Draft halyard tension on a head sail is a little bit further forward than a mainsail. Your draft, which is directly associated to your halyard tension, is roughly from 35 to 50% of the sail. The tighter your halyard, the further forward your draft will move. So as the wind starts increasing, you're going to want to start putting more halyard tension on, because the sail is going to get fuller. It will help flatten out the sail and help move that draft forward. But then when it comes down to when do you want to have it at 35 to 50%, and this one's getting a little technical, but I wanted to chat about it. If you move your draft forward, you'll have a wider groove in your steering, so it'll be easier to drive. You won't be able to point very high, but it's easier to drive, and it's good for choppy conditions or an inexperienced helmsman. So a lot of the time, if I have an inexperienced helmsman, I'll actually add a little extra halyard tension in the Genoa to give them a wider driving groove, as well as, if they do hit a wave, they don't fall out of that close hauled location. Then I kind of, with an expert driver or in flat conditions, you're okay to keep that draft closer to that 45%. I'd say 50 is the absolute max. And you're actually going to be able to point higher because you have a flatter entry in the sail, but your groove's going to be much smaller. So as an experienced helmsperson or someone that's sailing in flat water, you'd be able to do that. And the advantages of you're going to be able to point a little higher. Oh. All right, so you got a sneak peek there. This is the last slide of the night. Genoa downwind, I couldn't find a good picture. No one really takes pictures of boats going downwind with a Genoa up. I kind of looked everywhere, but as I said earlier, it's pretty easy. It's, ease it out until it left, then pull it back in. Some boats have whisker poles. You could use a whisker pole or a spinnaker pole to kind of hold it out, just because it tends to fall back into the boat, just with the angle of the sail, and usually the mainsail is covering it. Usually you have to sail actually slightly off the wind to kind of help both sails stay full. And I find that if you're sailing off the wind to help both sails keep full, make sure you're constantly easing the sails out to try to see if they're out enough. And then as soon as you see them luff, the head sail and the mainsail will luff, and then you pull them back in. One thing you can do if you do want to sail directly downwind, and it is a pretty fast way to go if you need to get directly downwind, is sailing by the lee. And what happens is you have the Genoa on say port, and you have the mainsail on starboard. It is, though, probably the most dangerous angle of sail you can sail. And the reason for that is if the wind changes or you're not paying very close attention, the mainsail can jibe. And everyone knows, when a mainsail jibe, the boom comes across very hard. So this isn't something I would do. I wouldn't do unless I practiced it in lighter airs. And then I would probably stop doing it in heavier airs. And if I were to do it in medium airs, I might add like a preventer. And a preventer is just a line that's attached from the boom to somewhere on the tow rail, and usually a little bit further forward. So if you do end up self-jibing, not on purpose, the preventer stops the boom from sliding across and possibly hitting someone. But saying that, if you can fill both sails and you need to, instead of almost jibing downwind and not getting directly there, if you can sail by the lee, it's definitely a pretty quick angle of sail to do. At the same time, you do want to take precautions, especially if it's medium air. I think that's all I wanted to kind of go over. I kept it pretty basic today. We could definitely do another one with some comments or some concerns on some other part of the trimming, but I thought I kind of went through the mainsail, upwind, downwind, and the Genoa upwind, downwind, and in the different conditions on how to adjust. So we'll just go through a quick review, and then we'll pop into the question period. So in review, we talked about sail care. So we had UV damage. You want to keep your sails out of the UV. Make sure your mainsail out of the UV. Make sure your head sail UV cover is good. And when you furl it up, it's the one showing out the sail. Just try to prevent flogging. You don't want your sail flogging very often. Decrease sail area. Add bleach and foot line kind of deal. Chafe. If there is any chafing going on your sails, you want to add a patch. If you are storing your sails, you want proper storage, a dry facility, and have the sails flaked and rolled properly. Leash line and foot line, use them when the sail is flogging, but remember to ease them off when you get back to the dock, or if the wind eases. And I think every sail should have, or every boat should have a repair kit just in case you do need to do repair on the water. The mainsail, we all kind of figured out what the draft was. We chatted about the main sheet and the traveler, and we were figuring out twist. Remember, light air, traveler up, main sheet down. And as the wind starts building, you start dropping your traveler down and pulling in your main sheet. This is upwind, of course. We talked about different sail controls you can use to power up or depower the sail. And last, as I said, twist. Twist is super important for that mainsail. Genoa, we talked about telltales and ticklers. I kind of confused myself there for a second. But I think I made sense. Basically, you can use those as identifiers if you either want to pull in the sail or let it out, or if you want to bear off or ease up, or bear off or head up, not ease up. Sorry about that. We talked about the Genoa car, how to position the Genoa car, and also, roughly where you want the draft, how it affects how high you can point, and also, what the higher tension does to the draft. So I think that's about it for today's seminar. Hopefully I touched base on most things you guys were concerned about or interested in. We do have a question period right now. I'm not sure if I've been seeing the chat or not. Maybe no one had any questions, and that's just fine. But if anyone did have some questions, I would have time for those right now. Oh, it looks like, okay, look at that. Sorry. I just pulled up the chat messages, so I apologize about that. When the furrow, okay, so I'm gonna start, I'm just gonna go through these chat ones. If anyone wants to add to the chat questions, feel free. Apologize, I didn't respond to them during the seminar. So the first question was from AJ. He asked when I furrowed the jib, even with slight tension, it seems not to fold flat. There are some waves in it. So depending on the age of the sail, it's those waves are probably just a little bit of the tired material as you start rolling it. The most important, I think, point to take out of the furling is making sure that there's only that UV cover showing. So there will be the odd wave in it, and that's okay. And sometimes that's also sail shape. So fuller sails, you're rolling on a straight forestay. Especially when you get to the middle of the sail, you'll start to see folds, especially near the head and the foot. But you're just going to make sure once that sail is furled that the UV cover is the only thing showing. Full Batten's comment from Jeff Bale. Not okay. Jeff, do you quickly want to chat about that one, Full Batten's? I'll wait till see and then. So Wayne Folds asked if does North Sails have sail repair kits? Yeah, if you guys came here, we could set you up. You'd probably want to give us a heads up that you're coming because we might need to order a palm in for you. We usually have a couple around the loft, but yeah, you just come here. We'll give you a sticky back, a pack of needles, bob and a thread, and a palm. So that if you are sewing and you, that would be fine. You put in sort of like some sort of waterproof kit, and that would be completely satisfactory for 90% of the issues you'll have on the water, and it should help you get back to the dock and then get your sail in here for repair. How can you estimate the drag? So Clark asked, how could you estimate the draft of the sail? So a lot of the time, it's really just a visual thing. One practice that I would do is almost add more halyard tension and then release it and watch how the deepest part of the sail moves throughout the sail. Something I used to do as a kid we would take a laser section out of a laser and put it out on a field and get someone to hold the boom, the end of the mast, and the top of the mast, and we'd actually put a little bit of water, like a liter of water, in the sail, and it would sit at the draft. And then we would pull our Cunningham, we'd pull our outhaul, and we would pull our boom bank, and we'd watch the water move around the sail. So yeah, the draft is usually it's more of a visual thing. Some boats actually will put draft stripes on the sails, so they're horizontal stripes. They usually put 3 of them on the sails, and it just helps you read where the depth is. And they'll put almost like little tabs on the middle of those draft stripes, so it gives you a 50%. But most of the time, I kind of use the boom as a reference point, and then kind of look up the sail from there. That's my my kind of way of kind of going through that. Vitali, jibe preventers on downwind use helps. Yeah, like a preventer on downwind use definitely helps if you want to be safe, and it's something pretty easy. Like you can literally take any line and usually you want to attach it somewhere in the middle or forward of the end of the boom, so 50% or forward, and you would want to attach it so I would say 50% towards the mast. Then you're going to want to go forward with it at an angle so it has no ability to kind of shock load and possibly break. Some people set really nice ones up with little clips and like a spectral line to ensure there's no line breaking, but I definitely recommend them, especially if you are sailing by the lee or you're going on a long downwind and you kind of want to relax for a little bit and wind changes, it's never, it's not always your fault. Sometimes it might be a little bit of tiller movement or adjustment of the skipper that induces the jibe, but sometimes there's big wind changes. You could be sailing 15 degrees off of dead downwind, and if there's a 30-degree wind change, it could be a jibe. So having that preventer there could prevent, as it's called, issues. Easiest way to put reefs in and like hove to. So easiest way to put reefs in, I think, is you always you drop the sail, and then you make sure that the reef kringle, or if it's a floppy ring, it goes around the horn. And then you want to make sure your halyard tension's and you could go upwind to do this. It's hard to do it downwind to help shake the mainsail down. And then you want to make sure that that on the back end, that the reefing line is not only pulled down but aft. So if it is attached to something, you want to make sure that it's aft of that reefing kringle, or sometimes they're low friction rings or whatever's that reefing line is running through. You want to make sure that the boom attachment is further aft, so it's pulling aft and making sure it's a really flat foot. Sometimes you'll notice if the reefing line is a little further forward than the reefing ring or the reefing patch, that when you go put your sail back up, you have a real big belly and you've kind of been a little counteractive. You're looking for less sail area, but you also want a really flat sail. And then you want to go back up with your halyard. So going back, you just go back up with your halyard. You want to make sure your luff is really tight, and especially if you're reefing. And then to kind of on the opposite way, you want to ease your halyard just enough so that you can pop your ring off of the reefing hook. Then you want to ease your reefing line, and you want to make sure as you're hauling up the halyards, now you're starting to raise the sail back up, you want to make sure that reef line's running, because if it gets caught or if it stops and you're going up with the halyard, you could rip the sail if it's aged, or eventually you're just going to stop if it's a new sail and well built. But you want to make sure that reefing line is running, because that's the only thing that's going to prevent you from going back up. And obviously make sure your outhaul is still on and whatnot. Any other questions other than that? No, that was about an hour. I think that was pretty good, guys. As I said, thanks a lot. Thanks Vitaly for setting this up. I've been working with Jeff for a long time, and Vitaly and I were talking when I was measuring up one of the boats for a new sail, and we thought this would be a good idea. I'd be willing to do this again for you guys on different topics, same topics, maybe go a little bit deeper. So I'll talk to Vitaly about that. It looks like I had another question comment come in here for best position Genoa on the furler, high or low deck sweeper sail. So best position Genoa on the furler. So I'm thinking high or low. Or so the thing is, it's tough to put a deck sweeper sail on a furler, and the reason for that is that if you put too much foot round on it, it'll end up actually rolling onto the furler. So you can't make a sail more than the tack angle of a Genoa sail more than 90 degrees, and you can't put a big foot round, or else it'll actually roll up on the furler. It actually starts rolling up. So in terms of like, if you want the furler sitting low or high, on a cruising boat, I'd probably put a little bit higher than lower for visibility. If it was a racing boat and you wanted performance, I'd probably put it lower. I think the biggest thing is ease of use and comfortability out there. So if you're a new sailor, and you'd probably want more visibility, But if you're a very comfortable sailor and you're comfortable being on the water, you're going to get more sail area, probably more performance if you drop a little bit lower. And then in terms of clue height, low or high, same type of thing. If you want, you don't want your clue too low because it changes the sheeting angle too quickly. At the same time, you don't want it too high because you're kind of losing sail area, but you kind of want a happy medium. So I would say a cruiser, you would want the clue height roughly around 1 meter, whereas a racer, you'd probably want it around 0.3, 0.4 of a meter. And the reason for that is just visibility. And then also your sheeting angle changed a little less. So having a higher clue, you have a little bit more gear changes to be able to move your lead fore and aft. So this will be posted on YouTube, the North Sails YouTube. That was just commented in the chat. I'll get it and I'll bounce an email over to Vitaly and he could probably get it distributed. But I appreciate everyone coming tonight. Thanks a lot for the questions. Have yourselves a great Thursday and enjoy your weekend. Good night, everybody.